Hi everyone, my name is Michelle. I'm currently a sophomore on the University of Georgia travel team. I'm really excited to teach you guys kind of about crisis note writing, the standards that UGA is going to expect when you come to UGAMUNC, what it even is, and how it will work. So I'll first start by talking about what are crisis notes? Why do we have them? What are we writing about? I'm sure you know if you're competing in a crisis committee, you're representing a person as opposed to a delegate from a country. So this means that you also have a personal goal that's completely separate from the goal of committee. Then the crisis notes are what you are writing to someone who's outside of that committee room to bring in resources for yourself and achieve that end goal. So in the front room, which is the physical committee room where you are, you'll be talking about oh, we should do this, the goal of committee, and writing directives. In the back room, which is the room of staffers who are responding to your notes will be focused only on your personal goals. This may feel like a lot of information, but we'll go into a pretty in-depth example in just a moment where we kind of explain everything more. So first we'll define some key crisis vocabulary. So what's called a crisis arc is that overall story you're aiming to craft using your notes. This end goal is that final thing that you want to achieve at the end of your crisis arc. The note is just one individual step in the plan, and in every note there will be some asks. So those are the specific requests that you're usually asking for in the notes, maybe 2 to 4, and these are tangible things that you want your writer to give you. What's called pivoting is when you have to shift your arc or change your strategy based on feedback you get from the back room. And then a TLDR is like a short summary at the bottom of your note. We'll show an example of this in a second. So when you're writing your crisis notes, you want to make sure to address who, what, when, why, and how everything will occur. We'll now go through that example I talked about of how to format your notes and how crisis writing and arc development really works. So here's one example of kind of a character portfolio in an arc, which is actually based off of the character that I was at UGAMUNC when I competed as a senior in high school. So very real, and yeah. So my character was Ursula Marr, so I was just this humble little pet food supplier, and I was the owner of a company called Paws Delight. I went in with those powers, which are portfolio powers. My committee was the dismantling of Amazon. It's prime time. And the goal was just to kind of address the environmental impact and other issues involving Amazon and decide the future of the company. So for my crisis arc, I wanted to create a monopoly over the pet food industry. One thing I want to highlight here is the difference between the goal of committee and then my personal crisis arc. So it's definitely possible within the scheme of the Amazon committee, but it's not at all really related to what the committee is trying to address. So let's go through kind of the steps of how we would write Ursula's first note. The first step in every single note is going to be the introduction. So you always want to address your note to someone. So you can write to real people like, oh, Jeff Bezos, or you can make up a character who fits your interests. Here I'm writing to Sarah, like, hey Queen, I've missed you so much since we used to work at the dog shelter together. You definitely want to establish that connection and who you're writing to. You want to talk about who are they, how do you know them, what do they do, and why would they want to help you. So here I've highlighted that Sarah is now the CEO of an international news outlet. Wow, that's super cool. And I was able to save all 8 of her dog's puppies. This introduction is especially important for your first note, where the intro should be the longest. After that, you can kind of focus more on the asks because you've already established that connection. After you have your introduction, you want to go into step 2, where you're going to provide context and establish your end goal. So you want to make sure your end goal is clear so the backroom knows exactly where you're going with your notes. Here, but I think it's time for Paws Delight to monopolize the pet food industry. Very direct. You also want to include why you want this end goal, because good reasoning means whoever you're writing to is more likely to help your cause. Here I've included that Amazon has stopped me from selling my super high quality pet food, and they're only pushing harmful pet food brands. We would never want that for our lovely fur babies, and that's something that can help. So then after you've established the context, you've talked about your end goal, you want to go into the asks, which are the specific tangible tasks and instructions that you want your person to complete for you. These should move you towards your end goal. So here I've talked about if you wouldn't mind running some ads that condemn Amazon for its pollution and environmental practices, if you want to discourage customers from buying other pet food brands, These are specific things that I want Sarah to do in order to help my pet food brand. You want to continue to provide reasoning and maybe an incentive for them to provide you with these resources. Here I also included, I'd love to send you some of Paws Delight's newest products, if you wouldn't mind doing some of this. So then we go into our final step, which is the conclusion of your note. Once you have the introduction, the context, established your end goal, and you have your tangible asks, you want to sign it. Hugs and kisses, love Ursula, so happy to hear from you. And then if you want to add something called an encryption, this means the backroom can't leak your plans. So if you're getting sneaky, make sure to add this onto your note. Here I've written in a secret language that we developed while we worked together. That just means that only me and the person I'm writing to can understand what I'm saying. So this is something that I talked about earlier that you also want to include in your notes, which is the TLDR. This stands for too long didn't read, and it's basically a bulleted list of all the asks at the bottom of your note that outlines your specific goals as well. This is to help your reader, and so they know exactly what you want and they don't get lost in deciphering what they think you mean by what you said in your note. Here the TLDR says I'm establishing that connection with an international news outlet, I'm running the negative press, and I've established my end goal of monopolizing the pet food industry. This makes it so much easier for you to get what you want and just to establish where you're going with your crisis arc. So yay, those were kind of all the steps of note writing. I know it went by a little quickly, but I want to go over also some just general note etiquette rules. So when you're thinking of your end goal, you're thinking of this crisis arc you want to achieve, you want to keep your arc very positive and focused on building up your own character. You don't want to revolve your arc around tearing down other people. So for example, if you want to build your own powerful company, yes, do that, amazing. But if your arc is revolved around destroying other companies, that's not something that would be permitted in the back room. At UGA, your notes should be no longer than a page. Do not write more than a page and always include a TLDR. I know it might feel like a tight requirement, but that's usually just what we expect here and what will be expected of your notes at UGAMUNC. If you write longer than a page, likely we will not read it, or we may miss one of your asks because it's just so much to read in such little time. On that point, it might be 30 to 45 minutes before you get a response to your note, and that is completely okay, very normal on the high school circuit, collegiate circuit. If you're like, it's been 30 minutes and I don't have my notepad back, do not worry, your note response is coming to you. In terms of your arc timing, you should aim to reach your end goal around the end of committee. So not too early, but not too late. Every conference will do things a little bit differently. This is just kind of what we expect for our high school delegates at UGAMUNC. So one of the final things that I'll go over is some note responses that you may get to the notes that you write and where you should take those responses and go with your arcs. So the first thing that can happen is you write your note, you send it back, and you get a yes response. This means that your writer has given you everything that you asked for. This is not bad. It means your writer likes your ideas, they want you to keep going. However, if you don't get a single no on your note, you might not be asking for enough. So in the next note, you want to ask for more. If you get a yes, but response, which means you get most of what you ask for, like 70%, but not everything, this is the most common and most ideal note response that you can have. It means that your writer likes your ideas and you're asking for the right amount. So in the next note, continue on that same path with another ask kind of on the same level, but that still keeps you moving forward. If you get a flat out no response, meaning you get zero of what you asked for and your writer is guiding you in a different direction, first of all, don't stress about it, but think about pivoting, switching around your end goal. In the next note, that is where you want to pivot. You want to take your writer's direction, and if you get a flat out no, do not waste another note trying to get the same things because you will get a no again. So, I know it was a lot of information, but now you can write crisis notes like a pro. You know what to do when you get a certain response, you know how to format your notes, think about your end goal, front room and back room, maybe take some time to practice writing a note. And yeah, we can't wait to see you at UGAMUNC. Thank you.